Welcome back to Hardball. Well, this week the White House tried to put to rest talk of some massive politically motivated cover-up on Benghazi, releasing 100 pages of emails. There they are, showing exactly how and by whom the talking points for that appearance on Sunday morning's Meet the Press, of course, by Susan Rice, was put together. But Republicans seem far from satisfied.
And you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this out. The story of Benghazi, if accurately reported, would undercut the narrative. Bin Laden's dead, Al-Qaeda's on the run, and they manipulated the evidence to help their political reelection. That's pretty obvious.
Well, that was Lindsey Graham of South Carolina speaking after the White House released all those emails, showing it was actually the CIA who played the largest role crafting the talking points in the end. Well, one man who knows more about what happened in Benghazi than nearly anyone on the planet is Ambassador Thomas Pickering. He co-chaired an independent review of the Benghazi attacks. Ambassador Pickering, of course, has a legendary career as a diplomat serving both Democrats and Republicans in many of the world's hottest spots. His review of Benghazi certainly didn't sugarcoat what happened, concluding there were systemic failures and leadership and management deficiencies at the State Department. Yet Republican Congressman Darrell Issa has strongly criticized the report, and Issa wants the ambassador to answer questions, but not at a public hearing. Let's listen to his rationale for that.
The fact is, we don't want to have some sort of a stage show. We had fact witnesses, they testified. We have the ambassador and Admiral Mullen, who conducted and oversaw the ARB. We're inviting them on Monday. We'll go through, not in front of the public, but in a nonpartisan way, questions and answers, and then obviously a hearing to follow at an appropriate time.
This afternoon, U.S. Congressman Issa took the next step, issuing a subpoena for Ambassador Pickering. He wrote, quote, "In light of your continuing refusal to appear voluntarily for a transcribed interview, however, I have found it necessary to issue a subpoena to compel your appearance at a deposition." Ambassador Pickering joins us right now. What's your response to this, sir?
Well, I've just seen this, Chris, and certainly I'm consulting with the State Department and the lawyers there. And my response, I hope, will find a way to move ahead. I've always wanted a public hearing. Apparently, that's not going to be in the offing. I think that's a serious mistake. And this is a serious step, and obviously, I take it that way. I'm interested in finding a way to make sure that our report is defended, that I answer all the questions. My hope is to do so in public because the public deserves to know.
When you think, when you're explaining to people who really seem to have, I didn't know the gentleman, everybody loved him, Ambassador Chris Stevens, he struck me as a dashing Foreign Service officer, a diplomat willing to take some reasonable, calculated risk, willing to go into areas that aren't completely protected. And we can't put a bunch of uniformed men into a country that we don't have sort of a post-colonial or a historic connection to anyway, like Libya. And you can't have lots of people around, especially if you're protecting or covering a CIA facility. Lots of factors here. Do you think there was any way to have protected him, short of him not having gone to Benghazi that day?
Yes, I believe there was, and I, in our report, listed the shortcomings that may well have helped in that regard. This is only a guess. Chris was a wonderful ambassador. Chris worked for me for 2 years. I admired his work. I thought he was a comer. He certainly was, and he had absolutely the right concept. Americans need to get out and talk to people and understand what things are happening in these countries overseas.
Yeah, I was a Peace Corps volunteer, too, and I think it's wonderful when these guys and women become diplomats because they don't hide in the compound and eat hamburgers and watch Super Bowls. They get out and meet people. And I think he was that, you know what I mean? And that's exactly, he wasn't a striped pants guy. I've got David Korn here of Mother Jones. I want to get him on it because we and I were talking, Mr. Ambassador. Here's some good questions.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Mr. Ambassador. You guys put out a very thorough report, unclassified version, but there also was a classified version of your report, which I don't really expect you to talk about right here. But is there a way to fully understand what happened in Benghazi and the security challenges there without really knowing what was going on in what you described as the annex, which I assume was covered in the classified version, which has been publicly reported as a CIA facility? It seems like we're only getting a part of the story because a lot that was going on there was classified.
Yeah, to the best of my recollection, action at the annex was also covered in the unclassified report, particularly in the discussion of what happened on the night of September 11th, 12th, 2012, and I would ask you to read that. I think it was done with care. It avoided the classified, but I think it's there. Certainly, that action was important in looking at the whole picture, and we reviewed it.
But in terms of the security position there and what was happening before the attack, and whether there should have been more security or less security, and why these sites are targeted, I mean, those sort of questions, it seems as, you know, you have to tiptoe around some very important issues here.
Well, I didn't in the classified report, obviously, but I think our report was heavily focused on the State Department facility. That's correct. I think it is important to know that in our report we listed a number of shortcomings. We held people responsible. It was a tough report. It was not an easy report for us to put together. All of that, if there are people who have questions, and if Chairman Issa has questions, I want to respond to all his questions. But I would certainly prefer to do it in public, just as the criticisms of our report were made part of the public record. And my sense is that we have answers to those questions. I've spoken in a number of places about them. I'd be glad to speak to you about them here.
You know, Mr. Ambassador, with all respect, and I think I do have respect for you. I'm not using it in the usual term when people don't mean it. I mean it. But, you know, I think there's two questions that loom out there for the average person who reads the paper. Why wasn't Hillary Clinton examined by you, since she was apparently on the phone several hours after the first attack? Let's start with that one. Why didn't you interview her?
Sure. There are two pieces there. One, we had a good discussion with her just about a week before we wound up. That discussion took place after we had completed a number of our findings, including the fact of who made the decisions that affected security in Benghazi and who reviewed those decisions. They did not go to Secretary Clinton. The second piece was on the night of, she had meetings. We reviewed a number of the events at those meetings with the people who attended those meetings. Had we had any additional questions, we would have asked them. There were no additional questions with respect to that, and I believe that we covered that thoroughly.
The strange thing is, and we cover the news here almost 24/7 around here, and I didn't know that Hillary was even on the phone with Tripoli until a couple of days ago. So wasn't it that important to you to make sure that was highlighted, that she was in fact engaged in the early troubleshooting here, and in fact after the tragedy was exposed?
I believe that was covered in our report. Certainly, it was something we knew about. It was my understanding at the time that it had been in the public, but I could be wrong there, Chris.
Okay, let me ask you the profound political charge made, and then David can get with one last question here.
Yeah.
The Republican argument, and I generalize here, is there was some sort of cover-up in the way that this tragedy, which cost the lives of our people over there, was presented by the administration. The charge is made that the White House made a point of putting Susan Rice, who was almost, to me, very much on the verge of being considered seriously for Secretary of State, put her on national television to meet the press with the idea of carrying the case that somehow this was really not another case of terrorism so close to the election, but it was in fact a demonstration against a movie out in California, a controversial, in fact, I would say a troublemaking movie. And it was really about that, and it turned into a riot and turned into a tragic attack on the facility there. And it was really all along known to be Ansar Sharia, all along known to be one of several attacks on our facilities over there, and clearly a case of terrorism. It was covered up by the White House. Your response?
Yeah, Chris, our report did not cover the question of criminal culpability here. That was the FBI. So the question of who did it, when they did it, why they did it, and whether there are criminal charges against him is part of the FBI report, which is ongoing. Secondly, our group did not review the question of the talking points. That happened after the fact. I don't believe it bore any relationship to the principal security questions under the law we were required to review. And I have to tell you that I'm not the expert on that, and I have really nothing to offer. I hope to clarify the questions you've got. Those are questions, obviously, the people involved should respond to. I think they have by presenting the documents, but that's not my area of endeavor.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thanks,
Ambassador
Chris,
Thomas
very
Pickering,
much
for coming on Hardball, and thank you, David Corn, as always, for helping with this. Coming up, when you're right.